We can just be quiet and listen. And when we start to receive something that feels negative, our first instinct might be to interrupt or defend ourselves or just shut down. So instead, I encourage you to just take a breath and truly listen and allow the person to finish their thoughts without interruption. This not only shows respect, but it also ensures that you're fully understanding their perspective. Hello, and welcome to Prospecting on Purpose. Today, we're diving into a crucial topic, handling negative feedback at work and turning it into an opportunity for growth. And this is challenging. We have all been there. One day, you're called into your boss's office or a colleague pulls you aside, and suddenly you're faced with criticism or constructive criticism about your work. And it's easy to feel defensive or discouraged when we have this happen to us, but how we handle this feedback can make a significant difference in our professional growth and our career trajectory. This is something that I have been personally working on. It's just uncomfortable to receive negative feedback, or if we're reframing it, constructive criticism. So for this episode, we're going to explore 6 practical tips for dealing with criticism at work. And the first tip is to just, when you're pulled aside, and you realize what's happening, just take a breath and listen. We can just be quiet and listen. And when we start to receive something that feels negative, our first instinct might be to interrupt or defend ourselves or just shut down. So instead, I encourage you to just take a breath and truly listen and allow the person to finish their thoughts without interruption. This not only shows respect, but it also ensures that you're fully understanding their perspective. So for example, if your manager says your presentation skills need improvement, resist the urge to immediately explain why you were nervous or unprepared. Instead, nod and listen as they elaborate, and they may provide valuable insights about specific areas for improvement. Maybe your body language could be tweaked, or your slide design and delivery was a little confusing. That's only going to make you better if you're able to sit and listen to that feedback. Another scenario might be a colleague saying your report lacked feedback. Rather than jumping into reasons why you couldn't gather more information, listen to understand what specific details they found missing, which leads us to our second tip. And tip number 2 is seek clarity. Once they've finished with their feedback, try to ask for specific examples or clarification if you are unclear. So you might say something like, can you give me an example of what types of details you may have expected to see? Or could you please elaborate what you mean by that? This helps you understand their perspective more thoroughly. It shows that you're taking it seriously. And it also puts the onus back on them a little bit to be clear about where the feedback's coming from. Why did they feel the need to share it with you? I think as a general rule, it's from a good place. Another example, maybe a team member mentions your communication could be clearer. You might inquire, which parts of my emails or which parts of my presentations do you find unclear? And this pinpoints exactly where you need to focus your efforts. It's a little bit less vague. It gives you more concrete information to work with. And then with specific examples, this really helps you understand where the feedback's coming from them. And then it hopefully allows you to remain more objective in a situation that can feel very emotional. And that leads us to tip number 3, which is separate emotion from fact. It is very natural to feel emotional when receiving criticism. I have definitely been there. I empathize wholeheartedly. I still have to remind myself of all of these tips. But if you try to separate your feelings from the actual feedback and look at the situation objectively, is there truth in what they're saying? Even if their delivery wasn't perfect, is there something valuable you can learn? For example, if your boss says your project management skills are lacking, that initial reaction might be hurt or anger. But if you take a step back and consider, have you missed any deadlines? Has there been confusion about task allocation? There could be indicators that there's some truth to this feedback. And so that helps us really make a plan, understand what our next steps are on how to take this feedback and turn it into something productive. And so really do your best to separate the emotions from the facts. And this honestly is a good tip for any type of uncomfortable situation. You're getting yelled at by a client for missing a supply chain deadline, whatever the example is. Really, the answer is just stick to the facts, try to keep emotion out of it, and that's going to guide you through. The fourth tip is express gratitude. And this may sound counterintuitive, but thanking the person for their feedback can really go a long way. It demonstrates maturity and willingness to grow. And it could be something as simple as, I appreciate you taking the time to share this with me. Your perspective is valuable. For instance, after a performance review where your manager points out areas for improvement, you might say, thank you for the detailed feedback. I value your insights and I look forward to working on these areas. Or if a colleague critiques your teamwork skills, you could respond with, I'm grateful you felt comfortable enough sharing this with me. Your feedback will help me become a better team player. What is important with this particular tip is that it gives you an anchor to hold on to wrap up the conversation. So usually when you're on the receiving end of this type of conversation, there's a lot happening internally. You might have an elevated pulse, you might be blushing, you might be getting angry, whatever your physical reaction is. So just from strictly a logistical standpoint, this gives a nice end to the conversation. And it helps you kind of have a script to hold on to and really wrap it up, but also from an energetic standpoint. It's nice to express gratitude for the feedback because if you're looking at it from the other perspective, which we talk about a lot on this show, giving others constructive feedback is also usually uncomfortable. As a general rule, people are coming from a good place, and taking the time to share some feedback with you is a vehicle to try to help you make yourself better or highlight areas that you might have blind spots on. Even if this doesn't always come out eloquently from the person giving the feedback, usually it's coming from a good place. So if we can look at it from an opportunity for growth and be grateful that that colleague took the time and cares enough about you to point it out, I think that shifts the mindset a little bit and makes us less defensive. And then tip number 5, so you've received the feedback. Let's develop an action plan. Once you've really processed it and sit with it, think about how you can use this constructively and then develop a plan to address the issues raised. So this might involve setting new goals, changing certain behaviors, acquiring new skills. And if this is necessary, you might want to share your plan with your boss to show them that you're committed to improvement. So for example, if the feedback was about improving your technical skills, an action plan might include enrolling in an online course or seeking mentorship or asking to shadow a more experienced colleague, setting aside time each week to practice and apply new techniques, requesting more challenging assignments to stretch yourself and push your boundaries. If the feedback was around enhancing your leadership abilities, maybe your plan involves reading leadership books, listening to podcasts, attending a workshop, or seeking more opportunities to lead team projects with maybe lower stakes environments. Practice active listening and empathy in team interactions. That's always good for anyone. And then request regular feedback from your team members because leaders are comfortable receiving feedback and asking for feedback, even if it is uncomfortable. It's just part of, it just signals that you're a good leader and that you're open to growth. And then tip number 6, follow up. So after some time has passed, don't be afraid to circle back with the person who gave you the feedback and really share the changes you made and ask for their thoughts. This shows initiative and a genuine desire to grow. So maybe a month after receiving feedback about your time management, you could say to your manager, I've been using those prioritization techniques we've discussed. Have you noticed any improvement in my ability to meet deadlines? Or, hey, thanks for the suggestion about my presentation skills. I've been more mindful of my body language when I present, and I can tell it's making my presentations more powerful. I appreciate you taking the time to pull me aside. So to recap our 6 tips, we're taking a breath and listening, we're seeking clarity, we're separating emotion from fact, we're expressing gratitude, we're developing an action plan, and we're following up. Now, before we end this episode, here's an important caveat. Not all feedback is created equal. Sometimes you might need to take that feedback with a grain of salt. For instance, if the feedback is vague, if it's inconsistent with other input you've received, If it seems to stem from a personal bias rather than a professional observation, it is okay to be skeptical. So let's say a coworker who's been known to be competitive criticizes your work without specifics, or a client gives negative feedback that contradicts praise from all other clients and your supervisor. In these cases, it's wise to seek additional perspectives before making significant changes. And we need to remember that while feedback is valuable, your own judgment and experience also plays a really crucial role. Don't discard your expertise or your instincts just because someone else has an opinion. And remember, while negative feedback is sometimes difficult to hear, it's often a gift in disguise. It provides us with an opportunity to see our blind spots and improve in ways we might not have considered on our own. And the key is to approach feedback, especially if it's coming from left field, with an open mind and a growth mindset. And instead of viewing it as a personal attack, see it as valuable information that can help you become better at what you do. And at the same time, using your critical thinking skills to evaluate the feedback's validity and relevance. And after all, the most successful people in the field are those who can take criticism, learn from it, use it to fuel their personal and professional development, and know when to respectfully disagree. So the next time you take feedback at work, take a deep breath, listen carefully, manage your emotions, express gratitude, and make a plan. And with these strategies, you'll be well equipped to turn criticism into a catalyst for growth and success. That wraps up today's episode. If you found these tips helpful, make sure to check out our other episodes for more insights. And remember, the ability to handle feedback gracefully is a skill that will serve you well throughout your career, and it's worth taking the time to practice it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.